Greetings, everyone. I am very excited to once again be back in conversation with my dear friend and brother, Ke'oni Hanalei. And we are going to be diving deeply into a discussion of the precessional cycle, and in particular, the Age of Aries, and how it's still affecting us and how we can work with that to be in a more conscious way moving into the Age of Aquarius. But let me just briefly introduce you, Ke'oni, although I think everybody knows you. But Ke'oni is an extraordinary wisdom keeper, wisdom teacher, and alchemist, founder of Pohala, Esoteric Hawaiian Botanical Medicine, and holds a deep understanding of the ancient ferns and their medicine for us. And he's a descendant of the Mu people, an ancient Hawaiian lineage that goes back at least 18,000 years. So we're going to be drawing on that wisdom and sharing together our own exploration and understanding of these ages and how to be moving into this critical time of transition into the Age of Aquarius. So thank you for being here, Ke'oni.
Mahalo. Thank you so much, Heather. I love being invited into this space. I always feel so nourished by you and the audience. And so thank you so much for all the encouragement that I've received from this audience and from you, Heather. Of course, I really honor and revere the work that you continuously and consistently provide for all of us. And so there's deep gratitude for how you consistently show up, which for me is actually one of the most mature aspects of Aries energy, is that sense of consistency. So already I just wanted to address some of these really wonderful qualities about Aries that perhaps that we will honor today and remind everyone of. And this conversation of the precession of ages, you've been speaking a lot about the transition between Pluto with Aquarius and with Capricorn. And so the conversation about this Aquarian age has really come to the forefront for so many people, either consciously or unconsciously. And personally, for me, I feel like, of course, this is a very important conversation that we get to have, but there is a little bit of bypassing that I feel is happening because we're not fully addressing Pisces, but we're also not fully addressing Aries. Because the age of Aries, as Heather says, there is some residual. For me personally, I feel like we actually might still be in an age of Aries because it has not fully completed itself. And so before we come into the celebration of Aquarius, we must first be responsible with where we are now, which likely is the transition between Aquarius and Pisces. And so honoring Pisces is so important. And then also addressing what I call like this shadow ruler, which is Aries. And so can we also address Aries so that as we do come into Aquarius, we can fully immerse ourselves in this Aquarian energy?
Beautifully said, Ke'oni. We really see this in a very similar way because my sense is that we didn't really work the Age of Aries in a balanced way. And that imbalance carried over into the Age of Pisces. So we didn't really work fully that age either. And now we're having to resolve what was unfinished from the Age of Aries in order to synthesize Pisces and then move into Aquarius in a balanced way. And you've mentioned you feel like the Age of Taurus was the last age that we fully integrated and completed. Can you talk some about that?
Yes. So I felt like intuitively, I felt like what feels like it had a proper gestation. So here's my outlook and here's my feel about the precession of ages is that each zodiac must accomplish a full gestation. From that full gestation, it births what I call a cosmic dowry to its successor. Its successor must receive that cosmic dowry that can only be accomplished when it fully gestates itself and can birth its legacy. And when I feel into Aries, no, there was no cosmic dowry, or there may have been. We'll talk about what it may have been. But the first mature transition I feel is Taurus, which means Taurus for me was the last age to fully gestate, mature itself. Perhaps, Heather, can you speak into some of these amazing qualities of Taurus that humanity has been blessed in because of this proper gestation?
I think the Age of Taurus was extraordinary in that it was really a profound honoring of the wisdom and energy of the sacred feminine. It was very much about the awareness of the sacredness of all of the life on the earth. So there was a real sense of the importance of that uh, honoring and being in right relationship with each other and all of life.
Mm.
The other thing that I think is interesting with Taurus is that it was an age that fully gestated because each age needs to also integrate the sign opposite, which, as Jeffrey Wolf Green would say, is the sub-age of each age. So Taurus needed to integrate Scorpio. And we could go into a whole deep exploration of how that played out. But I do believe that Taurus, then, that honoring of life, life force, nature, the sacred feminine, often also at the end of the age of Taurus, they were dealing with the reality of death and transformation and transition. But I think there was a way that that was worked enough that there was an integration then to move into the age of Aries. But I think some of the events at the end of Taurus impacted some of the out of balanced expression of Aries as we moved into Aries. But that's a whole other conversation. But say some about your take on Taurus.
You know what I love about Taurian energy and like this default Taurian energy is establishment, is to be established. And I feel like this is where humanity really allowed itself to become established and to become aware. This is where I am. This is where I am. Now,
Embodiment.
yes. And now we have the space to actually contemplate where we are and our relationship to it. This is where we became sedentary. And then we began to really cultivate a relationship with agriculture. And then the Age of Taurus is also the explosion of artistry. This is where humanity, our ancestors, began to recognize materials and then translate our perception of reality with these materials, creating art, instruments, music, writing compositions, designing choreography. This is where we became established. And I love that, that opposite of Scorpio, Scorpio is going to get to the nucleus of something. Scorpio is going to get to the depths of something. We can feel that in the convergence of Taurian energy. It's going to establish, it's going to land somewhere. And Scorpio is going to take it to its ultimate truth. We land in ultimate awareness of where we truly are. We are established. And I feel like that properly gestated itself and then did transfer itself as cosmic dowry to Aries. Because something that I know about Aries and mature Aries energy, I want to say this word, it's individuation. Now, feel this and feel how they complement one another, Heather. Taurus, this is where I am. Aries, this is who I am in the place to which I am at. And so, because we were established, we were removed of the hysteria of being in a way static, right? Now we were established. And I really love to, for many who are familiar with history, it's the Age of Taurus where we begin to see the bull cults in the Mediterranean, right? The bull. And then also, just as you're sharing, Heather, right, the matriarchal lineages, the grandmother of Jesus is Anna, and she comes from the line of the Essenes, and that was a founding lineage that was founded in the Age of Taurus. And so matriarchal lineages, Earth Mother. And I feel like that was definitely transferred to the age of Aries because now we're able to reconcile that static energy and now we can begin to question and then explore. This is where I am, and this is who I am. I am this.
Something that comes to me as you're talking, Ke'oni, and really they were matrilineal cultures because there was no time where we had the flip side of patriarchy, but it was an honoring of the mother line, an honoring of the Mother Earth, an honoring of art and creative expression in the age of Taurus. But it was also, you've often talked, Ke'oni, about that sacred feminine wisdom as the foundation from which the sacred masculine energy can express itself. And in the age of Taurus, Venus was honored as very much a major deity, Inanna in ancient Sumer. And Taurus, with a sub-age of Scorpio, is the integration of Venus and Mars. And it supports the gestation of Mars as the ruler of Aries. And Aries, the sub-age is Libra. Again, Venus is the ruler. So these two ages are a dance of Mars and Venus. But it reminds me of your awareness that we need that grounding, that foundation in the sacred feminine to then give birth to a balanced expression of the sacred masculine.
Yes, and I love that you're also addressing that the sub-age of Aries is Libra, because one of the greatest ways to reorient Libra if it or Aries if it does go into its juvenile aspect is diplomacy. Because I want to share this about Aries and individuation. If I were to take this word and this energy called individuation and I would place it in patriarchy, it would be immediately mistranslated as some sort of exclusivity, selfishness, greed. That's not individuation, according to mature Aries. Feel it like this. Aries is now saying, I recognize I am a gift. I recognize gifts. I recognize that other people are gifts. Diplomacy of Libra, right? I recognize that other people have a right to their gifts. I have a right to my gifts. And this gift recognition is all about the exchange of the gifts, diplomacy of Libra. Now, the juvenile aspect of Aries is to now take that individuation and weaponize it as comparison and competition. Of course, the result of comparison and competition, no matter how we try to tweak it, the result will always be war. And thus, this became the explosion of war because Aries was triggered in its juvenile aspect rather than maintaining the recognition. This is where I am. I am a gift. You are a gift. Let's exchange in these gifts. Rather, I'm a gift. I'm going to compare myself to you. I'm going to now compete with you. And thus, we've arrived at war and war culture.
So well said, Ke'oni. You know, it is so true that if you look back to like Maria Gimbutas's work on the ancient settlements in the age of Taurus, there's no sign of war. There were no even fortresses or walls built for protection. That really came into our experience in the age of Aries. And I think some of my sense, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Ke'oni, as to why we moved into an immature, out of balanced expression of Aries, is that there's increasing evidence that there was comet activity that struck the Earth towards the end of the age of Taurus. And I think this is part of the sub-age of Scorpio, having to face our fears of death, our experience of mortality. And yet I think that didn't get fully integrated in a way that then led into the age of Aries, and that you're saying it so beautifully, that journey to discover our own individuated sense of self was now trauma-based.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it, instead of it being about a secure expression of our individuality, it also became about this fear of death and of mortality that led to survival mentality.
That makes perfect sense, Heather, because if we took that individuation and then applied it to a catastrophe such as that, a cataclysmic event, now it's like the mentality, every man for himself,
Yeah, yeah.
every man for himself. And then that individuation became a method of isolation. And then also, if it is really cataclysmic, we're going to go into the favor of hoarding, scarcity,
Yeah.
right? Resources are scarce. Now we have to hoard the resources, which only amplifies and exaggerates competition, comparison. You have more than me, so I need to take more to have more than you. And then this battle, right, has just persisted throughout the age of Aries into the age of Pisces. And perhaps when we go into Pisces, Heather, we can even discuss some of the juvenile aspects of Pisces, because I really feel like because Aries is not fully gestated, its cosmic dowry is triggering the juvenile aspects of Pisces. This is the succession that is happening. They're influencing each other in this way.
And it is so sad because had we really worked those themes in the age of Aries, it is, like you said, that capacity to be in our own individual self-expression and the joy of that, of our own uniqueness, our own creativity, but in the context not only of right relationship with others, but right relationship with source and right relationship with the earth. And part of what happened in the age of Aries also was probably because of that cataclysmic event with the comet activity, a fear of the earth and a fear of embodiment. So then spirituality becomes transcendent, and this realm becomes the realm of, our survival.
Mm.
And that then, like you said, fuels competition, conquer or be conquered. And this out of balanced expression of Mars that is about aggression instead of self expression.
Yeah, so beautifully said, Heather. And if I may, just take us on a little quick journey of what it could be like should all these ages properly mature. Leading up to, I would go as far as Capricorn, if I may, but say that
Yes, do it.
say that Aries had a proper gestation, individuation. This means that I recognize I am a gift. I recognize that you are a gift. This is not a competition. This thing called life is not a competition. We are here to celebrate and be inspired by our mutual gifts. Now, that is cosmic dowry for Pisces. Here's what I love about Pisces energy. One, Pisces, for me, default Pisces energy is one of the most fearless. Being that Pisces will go into the realms that others think it's too risky. Pisces is so available for data and information that it just wants to explore. For me, it's frontier energy. That's Pisces. And many will call it dreamlike because it does. It doesn't limit itself. Another thing about Pisces, default Pisces, I have some friends who are default Pisces. They'll dress up in the most extravagant and silliest outfits, and they're not ashamed. Pisces does not get so distracted by shame, which allows them to be fearless, where they can be fully expressive and continue their exploration, their frontier energy. And so when Pisces receives dowry of gifts, you know what Pisces is going to do with that gift? Pisces is going to take it on tour.
Now that's really interesting, Keoni, because but I think this all fits. What I see is the gifts of Pisces. So Aries is that, Mars, the ruler of Aries, is that first planet outside of the Earth's orbit. It is about the journey of exploration and discovery, the hero, the heroine's journey. But ultimately, Mars realizes I'm connected to source and brings those gifts back into relationship, into community. Then you come into Pisces in a mature way. And Pisces, from my perspective, is that memory that everything is oneness. We're actually soul selves here having this human experience. So there is no fear because
Yeah,
we are always connected to source.
yeah,
So then we can live that out in that further integration of this incarnational self and my soul self.
Yes, yes. And when Pisces takes it on tour, Pisces is maximizing its potential. It's taking it to every corner of consciousness and introducing it. It's an ambassador, right? It's saying these are the gifts, and it gets to be shared with everything and everyone, that oneness that you're speaking into. And so it's going to maximize its potential. Default Pisces energy is not going to be so swayed by any blockages. It's saying, I'm here to simply disperse it. And then
Beautiful.
that now, as a proper gestation of Pisces, is now going to offer that as cosmic dowry to its successor, which is Aquarius. Aquarius energy, and I'm Sun Aquarius. Aquarius energy is very innovative. And I would even say Aquarius energy is very intellectual. And so for me, what Aquarius energy will do with that is that it will receive that cosmic dowry of the greatest potential of the gifts, and it's going to actually build an infrastructure of that. It's going to innovate. Now we're not just imagining our dreams and our fantasies, we're actually living them. That's Aquarius energy. Aquarius intellect. What is intellect? Intellect means objective thinking, meaning I have a goal, I'm going to meet that goal. And so Aquarius is going to say, I'm going to take this gift coming from all the way from Taurus, right? And I'm going to actually create an infrastructure of it. Here's what's so great about the infrastructure, because there's a consequence of infrastructure. Once the infrastructure of gifts is now created and it's made livable, it also turns into a contribution. And this is why and how I feel that Aquarius energy is so related to that community and assembling community. It's because it really knows how to honor contribution by way of the infrastructures that it creates, so that our dreams and our fantasies are also livable.
Beautiful, profound. Yes. I would also add that that energy of Pisces, which is the dreaming and connection to source and mysticism, spirituality. You're saying it so beautifully. It can come into more full form in the age of Aquarius. And I also think the age of Aquarius connected to the water bear, pouring the living waters of wisdom to the earth, is about a more maybe intellectual and uh, a deeper understanding of consciousness
Mhm.
and how we navigate our individual expression of consciousness in community and collective consciousness. So there's a deeper and deeper integration and synthesis of those different levels of consciousness.
Oh, yes, yes. And because Pisces went to the frontier, right? Took it on tour and maximized its potential, that's what Aquarius is receiving. And so the proficiency therein is so expansive. And I love, the glyph, right, of Aquarius is the water bearer. And of course, many will translate that as it's pouring frequency, but also feel it in like this. It's pouring Pisces, sharing Pisces.
The consciousness of water.
Yeah, the legacy of Pisces, Aquarius is literally pouring that into form. And this is the relationship they have with one another. They're family members. They know each other well. Their only goal is to honor one another, but they're also fair. It's a process of diplomacy as well, meaning they're only going to create that to which they receive. And this is a good conversation to be had. And I just want to kind of like back up a little bit by saying that I wasn't versed in astrology at all until 2017. Prior to 2017, I just knew I was a Sun Aquarius. And I'm like, okay, that's me. It was in 2017 that I began my own inquisition into astrology. And one thing that was very poignant for me is that many people, all they talked about was Aquarius, 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 to the point where I thought we were in an age of Aquarius. I was convinced because that's what everyone talked about. When I found out that we were in the age of Pisces, I was a little taken back. And of course, my natural follow-up to that is, why are we not talking about Pisces?
Mm.
If we are in the age of Pisces, why are we all talking about Aquarius? For me, this is classic bypassing because somehow we don't feel so connected to Pisces that we just want to go what's next. Like, you know what? I don't, do you feel connected to Pisces? No, no. Okay, well, Aquarius is next. So let's just talk about Aquarius. And now Aquarius is supposed to resolve all the discomfort that we're feeling and the disconnectivity we have with the zodiac when not really. Because what Aquarius is going to do is simply receive whatever code it is receiving from its predecessor, and it's going to exaggerate it. And once we go, yes, go ahead, Heather.
Oh, finish. I'm just so excited. Go ahead.
I mean, then we can go into the conversation about the juvenile aspects of Pisces, which is, you know, I would love to actually go back and do a beautiful streamline of this, but just for the sake of staying on topic right now, one of the juvenile aspects of Pisces is dissociative fantasy. Now,
An
what comes
addiction.
an addiction, right? Addiction by way of obsession. We're obsessed with something, which means possession. We're attached to something, right? And then dissociative fantasy. So now feel it like this. Aquarius is receiving this code of addiction and dissociative fantasy. And it's like, well, I'm going to build an infrastructure of dissociative fantasy. And so it's like, well, I'm going to be creative because I'm Aquarius. I'm going to be creative. I'm going to meet my objective. What can I build? Transhumanism, simulation culture. You know, the fact that that is literally happening in
Mm.
our culture right now tells me that that is the actual transference from Pisces into Aquarius. And so going back to my concern when I said everyone just, well, not everyone, right? But a collective wanting to be in Aquarius because it's somehow going to solve all our problems. Well,
This is brilliant, Keoni. You're so right, because what's ungestated and unresolved then spills into the next age, throwing that age out of balance. And then it just continues to cascade. And I think some of the ungestated aspects of the age of Pisces were also because you've got this out of balance Mars energy coming in from the age of Aries, which is about conquest. So then you have spiritual teachers, Buddha, Christ, beginning the age of Pisces, talking about love and oneness. So Aries takes control of that understanding of mysticism and spirituality and institutionalizes it into religions that then become merged with political power to have more power over. It
yes.
continues the patriarchal power over out of balance paradigm, which then ends up really disconnecting from the love and mystical awareness of Pisces and elevates this idealization of the mind, which also comes out of the age of Aries. And
Yes.
then it carries through into Pisces. And then Aquarius can all be about the mind and our disconnection from this reality or the spiritual realm to turn into transhumanism, idealization of technology, disconnection from each other and our oneness to be spinning out more and more in this intellectual disconnection.
Oh, superbly shared, Heather. And that code of addiction that's being transferred into Aquarius, right? That's another code to which Aquarius will build an infrastructure. Now we're going to be subordinate to our addictions. When you build an infrastructure of addiction and attachment, that means that we will become subordinate to that. And then I want to just go to Capricorn. Say that this is the line that we're now involved in. And now it's transhumanism, right? It's simulation culture, it's subordination to addiction. And then that is cosmic dowry, to which we're transferring to Capricorn. For me, Capricorn is law and order. Law and order. And of course, we can feel that in a very rigid way, right? Like excessive authority, but truly as you have shared so beautifully about Ma'at, it's just about maintaining order in the universe, law and order. Now, if Capricorn receives that cosmic dowry from Aquarius of simulation transhumanism, it will create a law of that.
Mm.
This is the moment where we completely split from nature. The soul becomes dismissed, and we are now, the sacred has become profane. Because in Capricorn, receiving those instructions will create a fixed law of simulation holographic transhumanism.
And AI will take over the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, in that, and I want to speak on behalf of what Capricorn could accomplish if we follow this thread of the maturity of these ages, and the cosmic dowry is in the greatest potential of the maturation. What Capricorn will receive from Aquarius in the infrastructure of our dreams, of our gifts, is Capricorn will reinstate us in the fundamental laws of the organic. This will perpetuate the legacy of the organic. Notice how wildly different from enforcing a law of transhumanism and AI, the machines, to Capricorn now reinstating the fundamental laws of organic life.
Beautiful, Ke'oni. And I would also see it as looking at some of the ancient myths about Capricorn and the meaning of the goatfish, that it would also be our capacity then to be so integrated and in balance that we can more and more fully be galactic citizens. But with our out of balance state, I think the Earth has to stay isolated from other galactic beings because we're dangerous. We're out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about how this could heal so that we integrate the deeper lessons of the Age of Aries and the Age of Pisces to move into Aquarius in a balanced way.
Sure. I want to share something very poignant that happened in the Age of Aries that could be a clue as to where we've gone astray. So at the tail end of Aries, I like we're sharing, I believe there was a beautiful transition between Taurus and Aries. It initially was this very beautiful complementary relationship where now Aries is like, oh, I feel so established and I'm so aware now, like, I'm a gift. Oh, you're a gift. Oh, let's exchange in these gifts and let's explore the gifts, right? This is where like in the Age of Aries, individual rights became a prominent thing, right? And so, like, we really began to just negotiate what does it mean to honor one another? Like, oh, you have inherent rights. Like, how can I meet you in your rights? And so that was the beginning of the Age of Aries, but something very gigantic happened at the end, the tail end of the Age of Aries, which could have completely disrupted its proper gestation. This is when the vernal equinox became fixed in Aries. In fact, I believe it's called, Heather, what is it called? The first point of Aries. The vernal equinox became documented as Aries to the point where it is still today called the first point of Aries. What this tells me is that Aries became captive because something happened prior to documentation. All right. Before documentation, humanity, the organics, cosmic was all governed by this elegance known as observation. Observation. At the tail end of Aries, we instituted this very synthetic thing called documentation. And so we enforced this documentation. We're like, Aries, we're now going to document you and we're going to fix you. We're going to capture you at this vernal equinox, which felt very unnatural for Aries. And I was telling Sister Heather, prior to this last 3 days, I was like allowing myself to, really channel Aries. And something came up when I asked Aries, tell me about documentation. And Aries said, immediately I said, please stop. This does not feel good. Please stop. But we didn't stop. We were arrogant and curious. innocently curious, arrogant. We're like, we're going to try this out. So just suck it up, Aries. We're going to try this out, this thing called documentation, where now we are more parts concerned with identifying our relationship with the world, with ourselves, with one another by way of documentation, not observation. What is an example of observation? Trial and error. It's the greatest university for any organic, not just human beings. Anything organic is trial and error. That's the elegance of observation. A great example is Hawaiian culture. We don't have a written language. We do now. It's not real for us, but we didn't have a written language. Mu culture didn't have a written language. It's not because we're illiterate in any way. We created and designed symbols, hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, but it wasn't meant to be how we actually archive our stories. It's all based on observation, meaning in Hawaiian, right? If we want to tell a story, we dance a hula and we have to observe that hula dancer to receive the story. And so the disruption that happened at the age of Aries was more interest, over interest in documentation rather than observation. Aries was now captive and colonized by documentation.
Oh, this conversation is extraordinary, Ke'oni. That is so brilliant because part of what you're describing is Aries then gets caught in that idealization of left brain analytical thinking and documentation. And then what happens in the age of Pisces is we bypass that way in which the mystical aspects of Pisces could help us come back into balance with that. And we overemphasize the subage of Virgo and the analytical mind. And what you're describing, I don't know if you've ever read Leonard Schlehn's book, The Alphabet and the Goddess.
No, I haven't.
He talks about what happened to us when we really started working out of written language, let go of the oral traditions, which you're so deeply rooted in with your lineage, and the earliest written languages, the hieroglyphs, the symbols, we're more pictorial, we're right-brained, and often exuded and energetic.
Mm-hmm.
So in the communication, there is this sense of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You get into more and more documentation, and it's left brain, and it reinforces separation
Yes.
and disconnection.
Yes. And everything you're saying, Heather, and also this is also the birth of plagiarism culture. Because now, right, I want to speak on behalf of academia just for a moment. I appreciate academia for two very specific reasons. It's an archive and it's a historical reference. But once we begin to base our beliefs and our identities on academia, that's problematic because now we're plagiarizing someone else's observation and pawning it off as our own. This is truly the disruption that occurred. Because remember, before this, before the time where we said, actually, we're going to document the procession, we're not actually going to observe it. We inserted something that was very synthetic. And Aries just so happened to be the one. It wasn't like we said, we're going to wait for Aries or let's do it to Aries. It just so happened that Aries was the one that this occurred at. And so now many of us, and let me just share my own experience. I remember, many boys in modern culture, especially in America, were not being properly initiated as men. There's no proper initiation. You know what the initiation is for boys in the United States? Go study the books, find what identity you like, and then be that. You're pawning off someone else's observation as your own. That's the initiation that many boys are having into manhood. And so this is plagiarism culture. This is fraud culture. And it was so interesting too, Heather, because in 2017, remember when I just really opened my heart up to the new age community and spiritual community, which I really love because of those Piscean tendencies within the new age, right? We can explore. It's okay, right? That's why this is my tribe. But one thing that I learned as I began to have conversations with people within the new age and spiritual community, I said, well, would you mind telling me what your fear is? Well, what you, especially because Piscean energy, I feel like there's a fearlessness with it, right? So I was very interested in this. I'm like, well, what do you fear, right? And a common response I receive from so many people, Heather, is to be deemed a fraud.
Wow,
That's
interesting.
the fear. And I can feel that it's even something that is so subconscious because as we bury ourselves in the books and then like, I like the way that reads, so that's me. I'm going to mimic that. That's fraud. But we are so unconscious of it. And this is Aries saying, everyone wake up. This is the captivity that I'm in. This is why I'm not gestating. If you can release yourself of the grips of documentation, I will spontaneously gestate. All you need do is loosen your grip on the fascination of documentation. This doesn't mean to invalidate documentation altogether. No, this means that observation gets to be just as important as documentation. So, those of us who are pouring our truth into documentation and contributing to academia, we're not going to stop. What we get to do is we get to look out to the world and tell everyone else, join us, join us. Your truth based on your observation. Can you also pour that into documentation if you so choose to? This thing called academia is not a competition. Why has it turned into that? Juvenile Aries.
Well put. Exactly. So again, it's competition, conquest. And it's also interesting too, Keoni. I think it's not only about reintegrating observation, but reintegrating the more ancient ways of knowing coming out of the age of Taurus, coming out of the earlier ages, which could have gotten reactivated in the age of Pisces, which is that I can know intuitively that we can open relationally to the stars, to the cosmos, to the earth, and know what we know. Those more
Yes.
shamanic ways of knowing that weren't just trial and error, they were, let me attune. I'm sure you do. Let me attune to this fern. And what is its medicine? It will
Yes.
tell me if I'm in relationship with it. So it's about coming back into relationship and coming back in to that mystical understanding of the capacity of our consciousness.
Yes. Yes.
And then we're integrating our left brains and our right brains and coming into a whole brain.
Yes. Yes.
Also, I think Pisces was calling us also ultimately back into the heart and that understanding of the love that moves through all of life and through the cosmos so that we're orienting towards how we learn, how we express ourselves, how we relate from the heart, from love.
Oh, and when you speak of right relation, it's for me, it's a feeling, right? It's a sensation. It's not an idealization. Because in my own correction with my relationship with Aries and saying like, of course, Aries, I will support you, I will assist. Where am I overly reliant on documentation? Where am I enforcing documentation on others without their consent? Once I began to realign myself in equal measure of observation and documentation, I'm just as available of trial and error as I am with that to which I study. I was like, oh my goodness, this doesn't feel good. You remember what Aries said? It says, please stop. This doesn't feel good. It was only when I finally positioned myself in that right relation, equal parts, because humanity is so numb. The titration that has been happening since the distortion of Aries, humanity is so numb that we don't feel how erroneous we are conducting ourselves at this moment, especially now spilling into an age of Aquarius where Aquarius is so intellectual and so innovative. It's like, I'm going to create an infrastructure of this. And that would be fair. That would be fair because I'm simply receiving instructions. So right now, as I feel, right, it doesn't feel good, Heather, that there is a disruption that gets to be resolved. And if I take the cues from Aries, it's saying, please within humanity, can we honor that observation just as much as documentation? That will be the moment that I can spontaneously gestate myself. I also want to share one more thing of how documentation sort of just erupted, because there's one other thing that happened in the age of Aries, at the tail end of the age of Aries, that confirmed this now fascination with documentation. And that is Ptolemy, someone by the name of Ptolemy, decided to sentence, regardless of how much space it actually takes up in the sky, decided to sentence each zodiac to 30 degrees. Regardless of how much space. You have a sign, you have a zodiac like a constellation, like Virgo, it needs a lot of space to gestate. So just like saying a generic number, right? It may need 60 degrees. Right? And then something like Aries, which doesn't need that much space to gestate, but then also feel it like this. If we've put Aries in this colonization, it's 2,000 years over its gestation. No wonder it's exhausted. Right? It's in 60 degrees now when it's supposed to be less than 30 degrees.
It's extraordinary too in what you're saying, Ke'oni, is, I mean, Aries is a cardinal sign. It's saying, come on, everything's in constant change. Let's move in new directions, not get locked in time forever. And part of what and that's the documentation you're talking about, but also that way in which we got fixed with our tropical zodiac in the age of Aries and didn't go with the change with procession. And I think tied in with what you're saying, Ke'oni, I truly believe how astrology will need to mature and grow and morph as we move into the age of Aquarius, is letting go of staying fixed in time in the age of Aries with our tropical zodiac, but also reconnecting visually with the sky. So there's no longer everything's collapsed onto the ecliptic on this piece of paper that we look at. We remember how to reconnect with the sky, the size of the actual constellations, where the planets actually are in the sky, and reclaim the consciousness of all that is. So that we're not just documenting the movement of the planets, we're communicating with the planets and coming
Right.
back in relationship with the life around us.
Right. It's so important to really honor what it means for something to accomplish a gestation, right? Because only in a proper gestation can it truly birth itself. And so, like the second example with Ptolemy, just sentencing these constellations to 30 degrees, regardless of how much space they take up, it's like now we're rushing a gestation. And then for me, the only result of rushing a gestation, such as rushing, like let's just take Virgo as an example. You rush Virgo, Virgo can be organized or it cannot be organized. If Virgo is rushed, it's likely going to be defeated before it even begins, because then it becomes obsessed with its need to be organized.
That's really well put.
And so I would say a place to start is, one, can we all remember the beautiful qualities of Aries? Because, before we came on this recording, I was sharing with Heather, it's like, because Aries is put in this very specific kind of quality, right? Like it's aggressive, it's war, all of this. It's kind of like just how we perceive Aries. Can we reorient ourselves into the beauty of Aries? And I even love how you shared about that cardinal, right? It's like Aries so many times is seen as this rigid energy of aggression, but yet Aries is this cardinal sign, which means like it can be so flexible and movable.
And again, it's in balance with Libra. So it's about, how do I express myself in the harmony and balance of relationship? It's the Mars journey. We've got this distorted sense of Mars that it's all about aggression, conquest. It's this linear trajectory into more and more success. When Mars in its journey is a cycle
Mm.
where it does its exploration and then it realizes, oh my goodness, it comes to its greatest brightness and strength when it's opposite the sun and it realizes, oh, I'm still connected with source. And then it brings back the gifts to relationship, to community, to expression in service to others. And then Mars disappears from view for a period of time when it's conjunct the sun to integrate that, to reflect on that, to mature with the results of this exploration and journey to begin again. It's a cycle of growth and evolution. And Aries could be that in its mature expression, how we explore our individuality to bring it into relationship, to be open to change and moving in new directions.
That, yes, that. And that is that true quality, I feel, and that mature quality of individuation, bringing that gift into maturation, right? Producing a result of that gift so that, as we transit through Pisces, Pisces is going to maximize its potential. I love that Pisces energy where it's like, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? Right? It asks us, what would you like to be? You can be it. I celebrate you. Let's go to the riches and let's announce it to everyone. I am, I am, I am. That's who we are, right? And then we go into Aquarius. Aquarius is like, oh, I'm so inspired by the tour you went on that I just want to create a result, an infrastructure of it now, right? And now it's livable. And that is an example of a proper maturation, a proper gestation of these ages. But of course, if we look at our reality right now, that's likely not our trajectory. And so the conclusion for me is how can you make good with Aries? And I love what you just shared about the process that Aries allows itself to be on, which tells me Aries energy is not about urgency. Where did that come from? I've been told that Aries is about I'm impatient. I need to get here, but yet that's not mature Aries. And so we're exaggerating this juvenile Aries when let's honor mature Aries. We will naturally feel ourselves relax into mature Pisces, frontier energy, just like you're sharing too, right? The reclamation of love once again, because it's no longer frightening for us to explore that. We just are that. And so, how can we all reconcile our relationship with Aries? And another token that I received, right, is how can I begin to also honor observation just as much as I find documentation interesting? That will release the grip that the collective has on Aries. I feel like that grip is like strangling Aries. And then I'm feeling like, well, no wonder Aries is in revolt. It's literally being strangled. It's literally being held captive and colonized. And so let's not victimize ourselves with what is occurring with Aries. Let's take responsibility and reconcile what is happening and what has happened to Aries.
You're so profoundly talking, Ke'oni, about the importance of letting these energies mature, be in their balanced, full expression. Otherwise, they're out of balance, they're immature, and then it just, yes, becomes this cascading effect. But the other piece that I think is critical is I do feel like some of how Aries got out of balance was because of trauma. And, like in our own individual psychological development, when we experience trauma, if that isn't healed, then we can be on this out of balance trajectory that just keeps influencing every other phase of life. And I think that's true in our journey of consciousness with the processional cycle. So if we can heal the trauma that pushed us from individuation in a healthy way, coming into that self-expression from a secure, grounded place. Instead, it became survival based and operating out of fear.
Yes.
If we can heal that and release the fear and the trauma, then we can come back into the Piscean mystical awareness of our oneness and compassion and love to then have it take shape and form in Aquarius in a beautiful, balanced way. Because I think part of what Aquarius can balance with Pisces is truth with love and bringing it into form.
And this piece that you speak of the potential cataclysmic event really actually aligns to the Mu doctrines as well, Heather, because that very activation of Aries is what in the doctrines, it's not the exact language, but I can translate it as such. It's the birth of patriarchy happened then. Now, let me explain to the audience what patriarchy means, at least in the Mu doctrines and like my own memory, right? Patriarchy, because it exists because there is a purpose to it. All right. Patriarchy, the purpose of patriarchy is to recover from a crisis. That's it. Once we have recovered, patriarchy must disintegrate. But we have become so obsessed with crisis, that's why patriarchy continues to exist. And so when this cataclysm to which you're speaking of occurred, we did go into patriarchy because we had to recover, but we forgot that we are already recovered. It's just like another thing I just want to address. I hope I don't trigger too many people, but within the spiritual community and New Age community, remember, I'm like a newcomer. Thank you so much for inviting me, but I have been able to make assessments.
And observations.
Yes, observations is that there is an addiction to healing and process. My question is, what if you're already healed? Then what? Then what? And so this patriarchy is fed with this need to always be in crisis because the purpose of patriarchy is to recover from a crisis. At one point, can we fully discern that I have now recovered from this, such as that cataclysm, right? The comet. We as a collective, we were able to recover. We were able to once again build our farms and our shelters and whatnot. That was the moment that patriarchy should have been alleviated, released, but it was not.
And Ke'oni, my take would be it wasn't released. And so it became entrenched in a way that continued to foster disconnection, power over, war, perpetuating trauma. So, yes, we do actually have to try to heal the trauma. But if we don't stop the re traumatization, we don't ever get to that place of being fully healed and whole
Right.
culturally in the collective. And the other shadow aspect for me of Pisces then is there's so much crisis. I think I'll just dissociate.
Right.
And I see, one of the shadow sides of the New Age spirituality is dissociation and spiritual bypass because it's not safe here.
Right.
So we have to stop the trauma and then allow the healing to rebalance to then move forward into the New Age in a whole way and in a way that allows that integration to move us into a balanced expression of the Age of Aquarius. The other thing that helps with this is that I really do see the precessional cycle as another variation of the Yuga cycle, the Hindu version of the precessional cycle, which speaks to our journey of descending and ascending consciousness.
Yeah.
And it was in the Age of Aries that we came to our lowest point in terms of that cycle of consciousness. We are on the path of ascending consciousness now. And if we can see what's out of balance and correct it and heal and realign, then we can really move in a very accelerated manner into a more conscious, balanced, mature Age of Aquarius.
Oh, yes, Heather. And with that resolution of trauma, sometimes it's just a matter of us observing our immediate environment. Such as if you and I are holding on to this code of a cataclysm that happened, 4,000 years ago, or more than that, 6,000 years ago. But if we look around our current environment, that's not happening now. And so why are we holding on to that? And so sometimes it's going to be the medicine of observation to truly reorient us in what is really occurring right now, rather than these patterns that I have become attached to. And that's what one of the greatest examples is this mm, many of us are not integrating the cataclysm. That cataclysm was so catastrophic that it exists in our DNA.
Yeah.
And remember, my Oli Helu, the chant that I offer, it goes back to Mahat, who lived in 18,000 BC, and I call Mahat the founder. That doesn't mean Mahat's the first human. That means that prior to Mahat, there was some kind of cataclysm that took thousands, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years for humanity to recover from. That's how intense the cataclysmic trauma can be. And one of the codes that Aries is reminding us is saying, yes, I have compassion that we all have this trauma that exists within our DNA, but just for me, just for this moment, could you just look around your immediate environment and observe, are you in a cataclysm right now? No.
Here's the catch, though, Ke'oni. First of all, what you're saying is so true, and this is Barbara Hand Clow's book, Awakening the Planetary Mind. It used to be called Catastrophobia. But her whole point is we have that collective PTSD that we haven't cleared, so we're still operating out of that trauma signature. However, here's the other complication. The ancient prophecies and the understanding of the precessional cycle and the yuga cycle, as I discussed with Bibhu Dev Misra, is that we're in the time every 12,000 years of another. It actually occurs every 6,000 years, but we're in the time of a potential major cataclysm now. So here's the key. If we can clear the cellular DNA memory of the past trauma, come back into balance, reclaim the wisdom of the age of Pisces, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. There is nothing to fear. We are soul selves. We're infinite beings. Then I think we can face this potential crisis point in the precessional cycle without fear. And then, if we truly integrate that wisdom of the age of Pisces, I think we can dream a new way of being and not have to stay on this cycle of repeating cataclysms and co-create with the age of Aquarius a new earth that is in balance and harmony.
Mm, beautiful, Heather, because part of me feels like the potential cataclysm that could occur is maybe going to be one of the first non-natural, man-made cataclysms. And so this could be that choice point that you're speaking of, right? It's like we are totally at the helm now. We will either create the cataclysm that we are due for, or we're going to cultivate this new world to which we will gift ourselves. And so I truly feel like that is the pivotal point, because remember, Aquarian energy is all about innovation. It's going to innovate something, even to the point where it will innovate a cataclysm.
Yeah, yeah. And some of the ancient prophecies would predict exactly that. Yeah. So this is profound, Ke'oni, and I think we're talking about how do we integrate the deeper, mature wisdom and messages and lessons of each age so that we collectively come into maturity and balance, so that as we're at the cusp of this new age, we enter from that more balanced place to let that be what we manifest, that what we put into form and innovate is an expression of our higher consciousness, is an expression of our healed whole selves and our soul selves, rather than our out of balanced, immature selves.
Yes.
So, do you have a prayer or a blessing or something from your lineage to support us in that?
I sure do. So, we have something in my culture called a hoike. And a hoike is like a kind of presentation that will signal that you are ripe in a certain kind of mastery. Mine was to document and remember the mo'okuauhau, or the lineage of the history of my lineage. And I channeled a prayer to which I transferred to my grandmother before I was just a couple days before I was 5 years old. And my grandmother translated it for me. I actually didn't know the translation. It's in the Mu dialect. I didn't know the translation, but when she translated it to me, she said, "You have completed the ho'ike. This is complete. Our time together is complete." And that's the moment where I was also then gifted back to my parents because my time with my grandmother had a full gestation. And so I would love to share this prayer with everyone. I'll say it in the Mu dialect and then I will translate it in English. Et morana inhi pawaho tukau. Et lai ka mere e tahe vai po alo. E lokota hotu. Tomoe, tomoe hewa. She alo oi he ana mach loa. La ea. He ko ka pua. Hanana hoi resh at loko. Paona she paet na vau. Et hulu. Et lololo. Und maat vai. La ea. And how I pass through ocean, season of breathless negation and calm. So it has been the crowds that come, lasting the night into a star, a dream, a nightmare. You are still in the waking, a long, long way to be. Well, okay. And how we be the flower, the experience, not a thing I imagine, but acknowledge the colors, the thinking, for all these people and all our places. Well, okay. Aloha ma, mahal.
Mm. Aloha ma. Thank you, Ke'oni. Thank you for being in this conversation and supporting us in healing, coming back into right alignment to move forward in a balanced way. Blessings and love to you, and blessings and love to all of you listening.